I am using an image from Flickr that I have renamed as woman.jpg. This style of effect works really good when dealing with pictures that contain a lot of fine texture detail, such as wrinkles. Once you have your image open, rename the background layer to Original by double-clicking on it. We will keep this layer unedited so that we can see the changes we have made as we progress, and it will allow us to duplicate the original photo if we need to later on. Next, duplicate the original layer by right-clicking on the layer and selecting Duplicate Layer. Name the new layer Woman. This will be the main layer that we will work with, so go ahead and hide the original layer for now by clicking on the eyeball in the Layers panel. The first thing that you will want to do is edit the image so that it has a little more contrast. Click on Filter at the top of the menu bar and select Camera Raw Filter. This filter will allow you to edit the image as if you were editing it from a camera, and you can adjust things such as temperature, exposure, and so on. Click on Clarity and move it somewhere between +40 to +50. As I drag this back and forth, you can see that it makes some of the details more pronounced. Also, change the vibrance around +40 to +50 to make the colors in the image really pop. After that, bring up the contrast so that you begin to see a difference in the shadows and the highlights. Doing this will really give the dramatic effect because we don't want the image to look flat for this style. You can also adjust the highlights and shadows if you want to, and then click OK when you are finished. If you turn back on the original layer, you can click the eyeball on and off for the woman layer to see the changes that you have made. Go ahead and hide the original layer when you're done. Now duplicate the woman layer, but instead of right-clicking this time, just drag the woman layer down to the New Layer button and it will automatically create a duplicate for you. Next, click on the New Adjustment Layer button on the Layers panel and select Gradient Map. Click on the gradient in the Properties panel that opens and change the gradient from white to black to white. This creates a black and white image and it will be used to define the shadows and highlights even more. Click on the Clipping Mask button in the Gradient Map Properties panel so that it only affects the layer directly beneath it. Change the blending mode to Soft Light and you will instantly see the dramatic effect start to take form. This is pretty harsh though, so go ahead and reduce the opacity of this adjustment layer to around 50%. You can turn the visibility of the gradient map layer on and off to see what it is doing. Select the gradient map layer in the layer directly beneath it, called Woman Copy, by holding Shift. Then right-click on the layers and select Merge Layers. This will combine the layers together. Add a new adjustment layer and select Color Balance. This adjustment layer will allow us to change the colors in the photo based on the highlights, midtones, and shadows. Select midtones and move the cyan red slider closer to red. Next, make the shadows a little more red and a little more yellow. This will warm up the photo. Change the blending mode to multiply and the opacity around 40%. Select the woman layer, duplicate it, and move it to the top of the layer stack. You can name this layer Details. Click on Filter at the top menu bar, select Other, and then select High Pass. This will give us a grayscale image of the finer details that we will overlay into the photo. The higher the radius, the more detail you will get. This will really make our dramatic effects stand out, so you can get as subtle or as extreme as you want. I like to have the radius at 5 pixels for this image, but the size will depend on the resolution of the image that you're using. Press OK when you have the radius set. Change the blending mode to Overlay and turn the visibility off and on so that you can see the effect that this has made. Set the opacity to around 70% so that it's not as strong. To even take this a step further, go ahead and duplicate this layer and rename it Wrinkles. By adding a layer mask to this layer, we can actually make the wrinkles a little more pronounced without affecting the rest of the image. Click on the Add Layer Mask button for this layer in the Layers panel. Currently, the mask is white, which means the mask shows everything. You want to hide everything though, and only show the wrinkles, so invert the mask by making sure it's selected and press Ctrl and the letter I. Now select the brush tool and make sure the foreground color is set to white. The black mask is currently hiding the effect, and wherever you brush white onto the black mask, it will reveal the effect. So paint on the wrinkles and anywhere else that you would like to see a little more detail. Take the opacity down to around 50% for this layer. Duplicate the woman layer and move it to the top of the layer stack. Name this layer Eyes. You will use another layer mask to mask out the eyes only so that you can edit them. You can use any method to select the eyes. I'm going to use a lasso tool to select the first eye, and then I'll hold Shift to add the second eye to the selection. When you're finished with the selection, click the Add Layer Mask button and it will automatically mask out the eyes based on your selection. To make the eyes pop a little more, click on the layer, not the layer mask, and go to Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. Set the amount to around 60 and the radius around 3 pixels. This will sharpen the eyes and the highlights. Click OK when you're done and set the opacity of this layer to around 40%. To make the eyes brighter, click on a new adjustment layer and select Levels. Click on the Clipping Mask button so it only affects the eyes layer. Move the white slider to the left to brighten up the eyes some more. Finally, give the image a more grungy look by clicking on New Adjustment Layer, Gradient Map, and turning the gradient to violet-orange. You can see that this will make the shadows a cooler color and the highlights a warmer color. Change the blending mode to soft light and turn the opacity down to around 15%. Then click on the gradient again to adjust it. Click on the purple slider and change it to a more saturated blue color. And then slide it to the right a little bit to make more of the shadows this blue color. You want to play around with the gradient and opacity to get the feeling that you want. To lighten this up, go ahead and select New Adjustment Layer Curves. Create a point in the middle and make the image slightly brighter. Select the Curves Layer Mask and hit Ctrl-I to invert the mask. Select the brush tool and make sure white is still the foreground color. Then just paint into any areas that you would like to lighten. Adjust the opacity to around 60% so that it's not too bright. Now go ahead and select all the layers, excluding the original layer, and hit Ctrl-G to group them together. You can name this group Woman and cycle on and off the visibility and see what it does with the final results.